Welcome to UX Evolved, where we explore how our profession adapts and thrives as AI reshapes design. I'm Eric Ellis, and today I'm joined by someone who embodies the fusion of technical depth and human-centered thinking that AI product development desperately needs. Meet Amit Popat, a Cambridge-trained mathematician who traded theoretical proofs for real-world problem solving. From building early iPhone apps during the App Store's launch to creating EasyJet's personalization engine, Amit has spent his career translating complex technical capabilities into solutions people actually want to use. Now head of AI ML at Cloudbeds, he's pioneering network intelligence solutions that balance cutting-edge technology with genuine user needs. In this conversation, we explore embedding yourself in the problem space, how immersing yourself with real users reveals opportunities that desk research never would, and why proximity to the problem beats assumptions every time. Tinkering as survival skill, curiosity and weekend prototyping aren't optional extras in an AI-accelerated world. They're how you stay relevant by continuously solving real problems for real people. Lessons from Alexa, building a beautiful Amazon-funded voice solution that absolutely nobody wanted to buy, and why the geek in you needs to be dampened sometimes. If you're building AI products or wondering whether your skills translate to this new world, this conversation will ground you in what actually matters. Amit, welcome to UX Evolved. Amit, welcome to UX Evolved. It's great to see you again. I'm happy to have you.
Likewise, it's a pleasure to be here, Eric.
I want to start with your background. What makes you unique is you have this ability to translate really complex AI capabilities into features that users actually need and want. And that's where you and I lived. That's where we worked together. So you're living proof that the best AI products happen when that technical possibility meets the human-centered thinking. So we're gonna dive into that. But first, tell me about your background. Cambridge math, building everything from payment systems to EasyJet's personalization engine. How has your understanding of what makes technology usable evolved? Surely it's evolved over the years that you've been working on this, and I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, well, I've been fascinated with tech since I was a kid. So, as a kid, I was building games in DOS, probably showing a bit of my age there as well. And at uni, like you said, I was studying maths at Cambridge and pure maths. That's about more sort of theoretical things, finding patterns in numbers and shapes and trying to reveal those deeper truths. And the heart of pure maths is actually it's finding those elegant solutions
Hmm,
to the most complex of problems. And that probably sounds familiar to you in the UX world as
sure
well.
does.
And it's not a tenuous link as you think. A lot of the skills that you learn in maths and pure maths do translate across that logical thinking, that problem solving, trying to uncover those truths in all the numbers or in the user stories. And whilst I was at university, I'll tell you a story that I haven't actually shared with you before. So by day, I was studying maths. By evening, this was just the launch of the iPhone and the launch in particular of the App Store. So this really fascinated me, and I was just creating little apps in my free time. And I think the thing about developing for the iPhone is you're restricted in terms of the real estate, especially at the beginning when they were so tiny. You forget how big they've become now. And it really forces you to think about every single user interaction, every flow. And like Apple, obviously being one of the pioneers in great UX, they really thought through a lot of these patterns in terms of the sort of the scrolling screens, in terms of how to flow through the different sections. And I think that for me was like the schooling in terms of what UX can be and how even as a more of an engineering side or a machine learning side, you've got to start thinking about it from the user's perspective first. So that was quite a sort of beginning grounding for me. But
The
I'll go off on a tangent. Can I go?
Yes,
Yeah,
you
okay, go on.
absolutely can. That's what this podcast is for. Tangents are certainly allowed.
There's a funny story. So just before this, I was telling you my wife and I we were in Paris a couple of weeks ago. And I don't know if you've ever been in the Paris metro.
Mm-hmm.
And you've tried to buy a ticket there. So there were two queues for the different ticket machines. One for the new sort of touch screen, and that had the longest queue. That had most of the tourists. And then there was another one, which was probably a sort of a system from the 1970s, and that had the shortest queue. And most of the locals were going to this one and getting in and out very quickly. So we thought, okay, let's give this one a go. And it turned out it was this really interesting user experience. It was this sort of rolling wheel to navigate through the screen, and then a little press button. Not too far akin from, I don't know if you remember the early iPods, which had a little
Sure.
scrolling wheel. And these machines were built in the 1970s. And when Apple announced these early iPods, they were talked about as being revolutionary UX and UI. But it's interesting how a lot of these themes just continue to play across different times. And it just makes me think it's not always about being first to the game. It's about actually having that cohesive solution that really addresses the user's problem. So in Apple's case, it was obviously the combination of hardware and software and the licensing of the music as well to bring that all into play. So I think for me, what sort of transcends across all time is just about the heart of the problem that we're trying to solve, which is just removing that friction for the user.
And removing friction for us as developers and designers. Think about the things that you and I don't even worry about anymore. Those barriers, the frameworks that solve the smallest nits that really just pre-package the solutions, allow us to jump further into ideation. Yet at the same time, some of those tried and true click wheel interactions still work. Dan Zola and I talked about the design of everyday things at the end of that book just keeps holding value. It still has water. It still holds water. But I do want to ask you, you mentioned something when you were talking about first learning software as you were learning math, and you said tinkering. Tell me about the value of tinkering, whether you're a designer, whether you're a developer. Man, I have learned so much in my career through on the weekends, not in my job. Do you still do that? Is that still part of your personality?
It is, yeah. I get less time than I used to compared to university, but I think it's essential because there's so much that's changing at such a rapid pace. But at the same time, the content is available so much more freely as well. So I am constantly looking at YouTube, understanding new
Mm.
developments in the AI space. I'm constantly building little prototypes and seeing what's possible. I think that's essential in the UI side and the AI side for any career, actually. I think that curiosity is what keeps us going and what keeps us progressing.
The curiosity it's the same with me. I wonder if that curiosity manifests in your job today. And if so, how? For those who maybe didn't read the bio in the episode, head of AI ML at Cloudbeds. I don't know what the official title is, but let's suffice it to say the power of network intelligence in hospitality begins and ends with Amit as far as I'm concerned. And surely in a world like hospitality, that experimentation must occur certainly in a sector that is not akin or not used to what the power of that can bring to the human level. Can you maybe provide some examples of how that experimentation happens in your day to day?
Yeah. So even when I started out in the space in hospitality, for me it's just so important to get that grounding and to be able to first relate to who you're building this for and understand their core problems. So I actually embedded myself in a hotel group, and you know this very well. We've talked about it many a
Please
time.
repeat it. It's a great story.
Yeah, when I'm beginning my own startup, Hotel Cloud, I just embedded myself in the hotel for a good period of about a year. And I was sitting there next to the revenue managers, the marketing managers, the sales managers, and just really getting to grips, firstly with the domain, because I came from a different experience. I had some experience through my time at EasyJet of the travel space, but hotels in particular were quite new to me. So there was a lot to learn. Obviously, I had a lot of other experiences that I wanted to bring in, but first and foremost is understanding who you're building for and what are the problems they face. And that's where I got most of my education in terms of this industry and the tinkering and the prototyping. That's where it began initially, that sort of curious mind, asking all the questions and then just trying things out, bringing my own experiences. Sometimes they don't work. but that's fine as long as you've got that quick feedback cycle. As long as you're trying things out, learning from them, improving them, iterating them, getting the feedback, that was so vital at the beginning phases. So I'll give you a story of like how we initially began. I went into this hotel, and the revenue manager there, he was managing about 6 properties across the UK. And what they were doing is every day they would look at their systems, look at the number of rooms left to sell, and write it on a whiteboard for every single hotel. Then they're phoning up other hotels to get their pricing or checking online for the other prices as well, and just spending half the day just amassing this type of data, looking at the whiteboard as their source of truth, and then making rate decisions based upon it. This was just 2019. I entered this space and I thought, is this 1980 or something? Like, how can it be this way? But that's the interesting thing about the hospitality space. That's where it was, at least back then. But we've seen so much development. And for me, entering that space at that time, I just saw a huge opportunity to bring some of my experiences, but learn from them and really iterate and improve and develop. Initially, it was an analytics platform. We didn't have the end vision of this AI all singing and dancing platform. It was just about solving the problems that we saw in front of us. And AI then became a thread once we had that platform of data. So it was a very natural progression for us.
You have the luxury, I would say, or the talent, the ability to be both a ethnographic researcher as well as a developer. You're the whole package, embedding yourself into your what became your future cohort, your future customers. As companies scale, obviously that's not always sustainable to have a superhero go in and have all of those abilities and do it all in one go. Yet I see as AI's barriers lower, the ability for a non-technical, non-developer designer to at least go some of the way there, to actually start some of that prototyping near real time as they're studying, as they're in the discovery phase. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you see that as well? Is the potential there to cross-pollinate capabilities?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that was the beauty of when we were working together as well, in terms of you bringing that UX experience, you having all the user stories, interviewing customers, bringing that to us. And now you're seeing tools like Lovable, for example, that mean that anyone can create something quite compelling with no code. And it just totally breaks down that barrier of what used to be one department of like engineering or machine learning, or used to be one department of product and UX. And now that line is much more blurred. You can go so much further in terms of the story that you're trying to convey from your research, from your insights. You can then bring that across together with the engineering. You already have something that is already at a very high level, which even 2 years ago would have taken a lot of effort to get to that stage. That's the real shift we're seeing, the exciting shift as well.
Are there guardrails to that? I think about going too far in either one direction or the other. Might a designer take a prototype too deep to where you're now backing out things that weren't necessary, or perhaps we're listening too myopically to just one customer and we didn't broaden the reach of what we were. What are some best practices perhaps to this rapid iteration to code that we ought to consider?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think where AI today is great is creating those initial prototypes, those sort of early stage views. So when you're doing your user testing and you wanted to show something to a customer, to have a nice working prototype is incredible and you can gain so much insight from it. But that wouldn't have been the code that was then put in front of the customer in production, because there's still so many limitations there. I was listening to an interview from the Perplexity CEO a few weeks ago, and he was saying they've mandated the use of AI coding tools across their whole organization, things like Cursor, for example. But where they're seeing most value is just for that UI rapid prototyping. But for more sort of substantial things like the back-end engineering, the algorithms, that's where there's still a big gap. And that's where you need that expertise. So it's about connecting the two, be able to bring in those user insights with that rapid prototyping and iteration, but then marrying it with a more experienced engineering background.
I think I know the answer to this because we've been talking about it already. I'm gonna ask it anyway because I'm still seeing this pattern constantly where you have UX teams that are orchestrating a fine, sound, user-centered design process. They're building these beautiful, thoughtful designs. And then you get to that back end place, whether it's just beyond the ideation stage, maybe you've gotten some initial feedback and prototyping, and they say, we can't build that. The endpoints don't exist, or here are the limitations, or we don't have the right framework for it, we're just not ready. And or they build something that doesn't quite capture the original intent. Why does this happen? Why do we still encounter what I encountered 20 years ago? I'm just encountering it maybe more rapidly because the cycle time has decreased with AI, but I'm still seeing it. Why?
I think it's lack of communication still exists. Like with or without AI, having a team that is more flat, that has that open communication is vital for success. And then you've got perhaps the product and UX teams working towards a slightly different goal to the engineering team. The engineering team are looking at things like performance and latency and things like that, whereas the product and UX team may be looking at the user experience and delivering on those delightful experiences. And I think like what you and I found when we were working together, what really works well is when you have that sort of single North Star metric that you are working towards. You've got those top level OKRs, for example. So let's say the North Star metric for a SaaS company, it's always more revenue. So I think where things break down is where there is that lack of collective view, but by ensuring that everyone's delivering on each of the individual targets and link them all together, I think that's the key thing there for any sort of engineering and product team.
I love that. That I think I'm hearing you say that orchestration can't be limited to whatever departmental silo that you're in, and gosh, even more so now as AI continually breaks down the barrier of who can do what. Surely we see a world where perhaps even back-end efficiencies or back-end development, that barrier drops as well. And perhaps even rather than de-emphasizing the orchestration, it actually requires a doubling down of that orchestration because you really have to figure out who's responsible for what, but more importantly, what hill are we all taking? Yeah, well said. Let's talk a little bit about AI and move on to some of your experiences. You at EasyJet, you had worked on personalization that was directly impacting the user experience. In fact, it was driving 5% revenue increases, which is huge. What was your success there? What made that project successful when I have found so many personalization efforts fall flat?
The interesting thing about this is it wasn't about the machine learning in the end of the day. It was about really understanding that user flow and that user journey. So this was a really fun time to be at EasyJet because they were creating a brand new website. So you can imagine their booking funnel from when you select the flights to when you choose the seats to when you choose all the upsells and ancillaries to all the way to the checkout. So it was a really beautiful time to be there because we got to actually track and understand that entire flow and understand at scale they're seeing millions of visitors a day. How can we actually optimize every single piece of it and then start personalizing it? So for us, this is where I got most of my schooling in terms of what's possible at that scale. So collecting the analytics in terms of every single click, every single interaction, that tells you the sort of what they're doing. But then to support that, we were having a session replay thing. So this is where you're actually recording and tracking the heat maps as well. And that tells you how they came to this decision. Where were they struggling? There's things called like a rage click where they get a bit confused and they start clicking back and forth. So I think that's where we really built up quite an extensive sort of analytics to support it. So we were talking earlier about having that feedback loop. This was that on steroids because you're looking at millions of people interacting with this site and you can understand if I have chosen a more premium seat, what's the next most obvious path. So this gentle personalization, but at that scale, when you're collecting that level of insights, it becomes really fascinating and you can react very quickly. And that was a very sort of fruitful time there because of that.
Curious, so with Dan's episode last week, we were talking a lot. His whole research world is qualitative data, and I was bringing up the multimodal research approach or multiple methods of quant and qual. Here you are mentioning rage clicks. I wonder, in any part of the EasyJet experience, Was the analytics enough from a contextual standpoint to know what's going on, or did you actually go in and start seeing the verbatims? Did you combine qualitative and quantitative in that effort?
That's a great point. So, yeah, I think the quantitative, it tells you the end result of what they did. But very often, like when we're releasing a new feature or a new section, I'll give you an example. So naturally, we thought anyone who's in the flow will want a section or a page where they can then pick, I want to add a suitcase, extra suitcases, or I want to add car rental, I want to add insurance. So we had a specific page where you can then click through to the other sections. And we thought, okay, people want to see that very clearly. They want to click through. What we found is people were just skipping it straight away. They were just moving straight past it and missing the entirety of the page. And like sometimes they were just clicking and they're clicking straight away. So we've got the raw events, but we were just trying to understand why are they doing that? And that's where the qualitative of the session replays came in, where you could see they would just move their mouse straight away. They wouldn't hover over any of those points because they probably were missing them entirely. So that led us to actually create separate pages for each of those and just miss that entire section of just having the four options and just actually go straight to the option where you see all the extra ancillaries in your face as a whole separate page. So it's actually adding more steps, but the end result is they're actually looking and spending their time more on each of those pages. So it's quite interesting where you have to combine the two. You can see the end result, but you don't always understand why. And that's where the marriage of the two comes really nicely.
I love that. Dig in on the things that quant just can't give you, and then get you hyper focused on exactly what the the interviews are going to net out to bring you. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the interplay between AI, ML, we'll say data scientists as well as developers, and then their designer counterparts. So let's take you and me. Now, I come into a relationship with you in what, a year and a half prior, knowing almost nothing about how to inject in any form. Nobody did, let alone agentic and multiple agents doing automated things simultaneously, which is now where B2B is starting to move to ever so slowly. So I have to fake it till I make it. Who doesn't? How does anybody credibly go in here, as a designer at least, and go, I know it all? No, no one knows it. Um, what kind of qualities do you look for in a user experience designer or user experience researcher when they work with you and your team, who are on the cutting edge technologically, to stay on par, to stay on plane, because it can be quite an intimidating area of tech to be doing work in.
It's also intimidating for me as well, because the pace of change is so huge that we've got to always keep looking to see what's around the corner, what's new. There's only so much reading you can do, but
Right.
the more people you speak to, the more people you engage with in the space, you get little nuggets. And what I found from our early interactions was you brought that whole wealth of experience in terms of the hospitality domain. You were able to really get to the heart of the customer problems. And that sort of also helped me from the AI perspective to understand. And together we really understood it's AI isn't the product. AI is just the enabler at the end of the day. It makes those experiences so much richer, more nuanced, but it's not the product in itself. You don't sell AI, you sell the solution, which is so much greater because of it. And I think that was the real sort of shift that we found. So we're able to forecast hotel occupancy to up to 95% over the sort of 3-month window, which was incredible, which was really a big piece of pioneering effort. But how does that fit into the actual user story? Where does that actually deliver in a very seamless way? We can say your forecast only to have 80% occupancy. What are the reasons behind it? And can I actually give a targeted recommendation? It's about really unlocking those new possibilities in a lot more seamless and automated way. And that's where that interaction really came into fruition really well.
What I'm hearing is that you're really asking someone like me or someone in my shoes to play to their strengths, that they're there for a reason. And the human insights we brought enable the technological capabilities. And I wonder if the inverse of that is true, that a designer going in and working with someone, of your caliber or on your team, all they do is really ask for the meet us there, meet us at the human level. So your having been embedded from your hotel cloud days unlocked our ability to go, why can't we just ask the same people he knows? And then you being willing to go, yes, that is the right point in the process to be asking, rather than to go, look, we've got a backlog here. We got to meet our sprint deadlines. I don't ever remember having a conversation with you about backlog management. I only remember having conversations around right sizing solutions or right fitting solutions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think your sort of experience there, you've been speaking to countless number of customers as well. You came in with that wealth of experience. We came in with that sort of AI experience. It's really worked very well together. And yeah, it was a very sort of productive time together there, I think.
What are some, there's got to be some education that must occur on our end. Maybe you do this too, but I find myself just giving just like you said, a YouTube link here, a freemium opportunity there. You mentioned Lovable, for example, just to get your feet wet. What do you wish UX professionals understood about AI and machine learning that would make collaboration more effective? We stumbled upon it, but we also had years of experience under our belt on either side of the SaaS equation, whereas we know that teammates don't often have that luxury. So what can we do on our end to be more educated or more prepared in this AI era to be good designers?
So I'm going to put a stat out there. It's not my own stat, it's from the MIT Business Review. And this was just in 2025. And they said that 95% of AI solutions fail. That's a huge number. That's like almost all of them fail.
Right.
And that's because so many enterprises just look at AI from the totally wrong perspective. They say they see the buzz around AI, they see the growth of all these sort of unicorns popping up, and they think, okay, we have to be involved in AI. AI is this sort of big magic thing, but without really understanding what it can do and also what it can't do, because AI isn't magic. It can only do a certain amount. It does hallucinate. If you're looking at the LLMs, for example, how many times have we asked a question and it says the answer so confidently that you believe it, but it's actually incorrect. And it's not just about when AI is good. So like I touched on earlier, we're reaching 95% forecast accuracy. It sounds great, but what is the cost of that 5% going wrong?
That's a good point.
That's the bigger problem. And that's what consumes most of my time. How can you minimize and mitigate that risk? And then obviously, how can you continue to improve and get that feedback? So it's about just realizing that AI can't solve everything. And you've got to actually understand what it can't solve. And there's this term called human in the loop, which is quite common now. And that's about actually making sure for those high risk decisions, things like, for example, generating an email marketing campaign, we're never going to just automatically send off marketing campaigns because the risk there to your brand is so huge. There are the guardrails in place, or the human is fully in control of that, but they're just hitting accept. So I think that's the shift there from the UX and from the designer to understand that mix of what's possible and what's not, and then doing the research, trying out all these tools, Lovable, and watching the videos and just prototyping and playing, but just keeping in the back of the mind what's possible and what's not.
You mentioned cost, and not just reputational cost. I think actually economics, like tokens ain't free. And I find myself questioning designs I see where, my gosh, is AI really needed there? Or are we just not doing a good job of querying what we already have at our disposal a little bit smarter? Some good old fashioned machine learning can solve the trick in places where it's very easy to just go in and say the LLM will just output a response where the reward of that is perhaps low and not worth the effort. Do you see that as well, or does
Yeah,
that hit your desk from time to time?
that's totally true. So me obviously coming from that maths and statistics type of background, more machine learning, you can see the difference there. So yes, LLMs have improved incredibly. The rate of improvement is scary, but they still aren't able to do this most simple things in terms of simple regression, simple forecasting. So it's about understanding what is needed when, and that's the most important thing. So I think the first phase of this ChatGPT boom was everyone wants to build a chatbot, and this chatbot can solve everything. But that's where we see most of those failures, like companies just going in and assuming that chatbots can answer everything. But very quickly, you'll find that people get disheartened. They want to speak to a human at the end of the day, or it's not giving the right results. And then you lose trust and you just had a wasted project.
We've gone from data in the past, predictive analytics, recommended actions. Where do we go next? Is B2B ready for the agentic future that I see coming? You've got cross-industry experience. We've spent a lot of time in hospitality, but you've got oil and gas, you've got payments. What kinds of patterns are we, where do you take it from here? Where do we go from here? What's the future that designers ought to be schooling themselves on beyond just, hey, I got you the graphic. I got you some recommendations. I maybe even have you some quick buttons to take care of some of that automatically. But what goes on after? What's the next phase?
So I think you touched on it there in terms of the sort of agentic workflows that seem to be banded about so freely and across this last year in particular. And I think what the AI agent world is all about is agents are brilliant at being able to piece together all these different data sources. So we are used to in so many industries, different silos. In the hotel space, you've got like your revenue teams, your marketing teams, your sort of operations, guest experience, all typically working separately. And the heart of the challenge traditionally is about how can we bring together all this data? How can we make sure we're in all possession of it? But now, actually, with AI agents, you can have a specialized agent that is just great at revenue management. It's just using machine learning under the hood, but it's surfacing it in a simple way. It's pulling out those insights. You can have another agent that's just great at writing marketing emails, for example. So what then happens is you have this multi-agent layer sitting on top. You can ask a simple question as a hotel manager today. You can say, what's my performance looking for the next month? And it will go to the revenue agent. It will ask and it'll query the database. It will say, these are your sales. This is how your forecast to do because it's using ML as well as AI. And then it can start to take further actions. It can actually figure out you're looking a bit far below your targets. I can recommend the revenue agent to increase to lower your rates, but then I can also recommend the marketing agent to create an email campaign. I can recommend the sales agent to actually start looking in the area and seeing what corporates are in the area. Can I start targeting additional things? So it's really a way of coordinating all those different sort of data sources and unlocking even more potential. That's the real sort of shift that we're seeing, and everyone seems to be talking about this space. I haven't seen anyone, at least in the hospitality space, do it very well yet, but it's coming and it's an exciting time to be there.
My closest touch with that so far has been experimenting with multiple agents in Claude Code, just vibe coding. I'm not a developer by trade, but to moonlight as one on the weekends and getting a handle on having a UX agent, having a tester agent, having an infrastructure agent. The orchestration of those agents is a new metaphor in and of itself. And I wonder if actually that's where UX, that's going to be the next big thing for us to figure out is actually how do you take someone who used to be a player on a team and now make them the director of an orchestra? But do it in a way where it's still playing to their what they bring to the table. We're not going to ask them to do something or to manage something that would be harder if they were human beings, let alone be technological agents. Just to have all of the parts of the orchestra play well together. So that directing is really just you asking what you want, the nuance, the what you bring to the table gets emphasized. I honestly don't have the answer to any of those things, but I do see it coming.
Yeah, I don't think any of us have the full answer to that. But you're totally right. There's a shift in all of our roles. It's now understanding about prompt engineering a lot more, and that's something that's totally multidiscipline. Like traditionally, AI was the domain of just data scientists. They were the masters of AI, and that was like a clear distinction between them and everyone else. But actually, then with LLMs, it became more there's APIs available, and then software engineers can start doing the same flows. And now with all these no-code solutions as well, Now the product and UX can take over a lot of these things as well. So it's like a real new way, a new language of interacting, but it's a fun time as well. It's learning new skills for all of us.
Scary but fun. Tell me about the product development process. Do you feel like the agile model, in whatever way we decide to use it, which seems to be completely bespoke depending on what company you work for, do you think it's kept up with advances in how we use AI at work? Or do you think the whole thing needs to be rethought?
I think it can still work, but for modern data science teams, agile isn't good enough. And by that, I say if for a proper data science approach and prototype, data science experiment, there are several parts to the journey. And the initial part is actually just fully understanding the business requirements. This is something that gets missed from so many data science teams. We were talking earlier about 95% of data science experiments just failing. It's because of that process isn't necessarily always conducive for data science success. So I'll tell you a story. When I first started building my very first data science team, and what a lot of companies do is they just assume we need a data scientist. This data scientist is going to be able to solve all of my problems.
Of course, why not? Wait, that's wrong? I'm sorry. You just blew my mind. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, as you quite rightly are alluding to there, that alone is just missing so much. Then the minute the scientist comes in, they're looking for the data that they need to be able to start making their decisions. Well, then you need a data engineer. In fact, you often need more data engineers than you need data scientists because they're the ones doing all the plumbing to give them the data. But before all of that, you need to have a full understanding of the domain because data scientists in their sort of their passion and their knowledge, they want to build the best model, they want to create the most advanced thing, but are they solving the right problems? So I think a lot of the process that goes in for building data science teams is often misunderstood, and I think that's still why so many data science projects are failing. So agile can work if you've got the right stakeholders in place who are there to make sure those product requirements are properly brought through. But I think nowadays you need someone who's a bit more of a mix involved at the different stages to be able to knit the threads together.
That's really interesting. And it almost comes full circle to the beginning of our conversation. I literally just left my kids, my two youngest kids' school, and we did take your dad or mom to work day and tell us what you do. And I always hit on web design, and now it's web design and AI. And we did a 20-minute exercise on storytelling, and how I find myself with my teams doing the exact same thing that you just mentioned, which is the wild ideas start first. And then we find ourselves in every sprint and every stand up talking about wild ideas. And how far along are you in that wild idea? And is that wild idea broken down to the MVP? And when is the MVP going to ship? And in a world where the economics reward shipping and money is expensive, there really isn't any talk of what are we solving? And so I often hearken back to for whom, under what conditions. Let's approach this with a scientific method, and design sprinting has its place in there too. But I wonder if that's what you're speaking about, that scientific method ought to not just be an engineering methodology.
Yeah, I think that touches on it brilliantly. Obviously, as I've strayed from engineering to product, it also means I've made mistakes in both as well and learned from them. So I'll give you one of the sort of horror stories of my background. So at the time of when I was still developing Hotel Cloud, we had a number of different streams. We were developing analytics, we were developing marketing solutions, and then the AI layer on top of it. But one other avenue that I explored was probably 2020, so just post COVID. There was an opportunity where I don't know if you've heard of Alexa for hospitality. So this was those Alexa
Sure.
devices being brought into the hotel rooms. So me
Disney
as
still
my
has
sort of
them.
engineer,
They're still there.
they still do.
They
They're one
still
of the
got them.
few success cases.
Yeah, the one success case I've heard of. Yeah,
Yes, because they can tell all the nice stories with the Mickey Mouse
that's
voice. I think is
yeah.
successful. But they tried to bring it into the EU, and I managed to be the first sort of property like to bring it into the EU. So I was quite proud of myself. I was thinking, yeah, I've managed to partner with Amazon. We're bringing Alexa into the EU, and we're going to be the first sort of group to do. And from my engineering side, I was thinking, this is so cool. Like, this is going to revolutionize hotels, and it's going to be like an incredible user experience. Everyone will order their dinner from it and ask
Sure.
any questions and answers. And we built it. We produced a really beautiful video. It looked incredible. Amazon funded all of this. And then no one bought it. And then like, we got trials in several hotels, and like it was working beautifully for the hotels that had it. And me, from the engineering background, I want like perfection. So I was making it the nicest experience possible. I was collecting all the analytics, and it was earning the money. People were ordering food from it, but no one was buying it still. And not at any point did I really sit down and actually speak to the hoteliers and say, what would be working for you? Yes, the solution in theory works, but it's going to cost so much to get these devices in there, to install them, to maintain them, to update all the content. And at the same time, every user comes in to the hotel, every guest, they've got their own phone. You can just send them an SMS with the same information. They can just message you. So this was the same time there was the growth of guest messaging apps. So Alexa got left truly well and behind, and definitely was a big sort of failure. And I think the failure for me wasn't that necessarily we built a prototype. That's great. But it's the time we spent building the prototype. We didn't have that clear feedback loop. We weren't really involving a wide set of customers. And for me, that was another big sort of lesson where we really understood the value of what made us successful at the beginning was me speaking to hoteliers, developing these solutions around their real needs. And then the sort of the engineering side of me, the geek in me, had to be dampened down a bit and honed in a bit.
It humbles you, does it not? It takes
It does.
the one thing I've learned in the 20 some odd years I've been a designer is it's not about you. And the ego has to be put aside, not from a standpoint of conceitedness, but just from a standpoint of this baby will be birthed whether the environmental factors that have to go into this being successful is beyond you. You're there to shepherd
Yes,
something, and what are
that's
the
it.
practices? But the prototype is not the end game. So really great story. I like that one. Yes, I do agree that the only nice thing about that Alexa in the Disney resorts is being able to have it speak like Mickey Mouse and tell a story. But in no way am I ordering my food from that thing. I'm gonna leave. We're gonna close this up with something that I ask every guest. I'm going to give you a little nuanced version if you should so choose to answer it this way. But I ask, if you could if you could redesign one thing in the universe, anything at all, what would it be and why? It can be a product, it can be a service, it can be the government, it can be anything. I'm going to give you a nuance. If you could redevelop something, anything at all, what would it be and why?
I'll give you a current one. I don't know if you saw Apple's latest iPhone holder, which looks very much like a sock that you can put an iPhone into. I think that this is one example of something that perhaps is pushing the bounds of Apple loyalty, is what I'll say.
Tell me
I think as
more.
an
Tell me
example.
more.
So it's essentially like a holder that you can just slot your iPhone into quite easily. But it's essentially just a wooden sort of sock with a little gap there, and it's designed by Apple, costing approximately $200. It's something that I would strongly want to redesign and speak to whoever created that, and guide them to perhaps their thinking along my sort of failure of Alexa in that regards.
I think they have so much money that they can print that they probably didn't do their due diligence, and I would argue maybe don't care. I
That's
was
the other
hoping that
side.
you were going to say the 1970s style kiosk in the Paris metro, but it sounded to me like that's not the one that needs to be changed. That seems like it's working
Not
quite
at
well.
all. Yeah, that still works today, despite it being developed in the 1970s. Like when you
Beautiful.
think about what Apple did at the very beginning, they stole the UI from another company at the very beginning and then honed it and perfected it. So that they're masters of doing that. But maybe this is one where they probably should have stolen the design from someone else instead of creating it themselves.
Steve would be rolling in his grave. Amit, thank you very much for your time. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and we welcome you back anytime.
My pleasure, Eric. Always a pleasure.